877-ERIC, 877-973-7425 for those of you who are hemorrhoids. Now, we... Okay, I gotta begin the day here with this bit of bizarreness. Some back. We were scrambling this morning. Let me just put it to you this way. There's been a shooting on the interstate in Atlanta, and it happened around 5 o'clock this morning. I think one person's dead at least. Another shot. A third person has gone missing. I don't know it's crazy. And our board op and hero of the show, Jim, but for whom we couldn't do this, is generally at the station by 8:30 when I automatically connect from my home studio in Macon, and he's not. He didn't answer down the line. Where's Jim? This is odd. Maybe he's going to get something to eat. Well, I'm in the shower and the phone rings. I don't recognize the number. It turns out to be Jim, and the interstate is still shut down in Atlanta. Now, I realize that the rest of you are in places that have normal traffic. Atlanta traffic this morning is a disaster. It is a mess. Traffic is backed up every which way, everywhere. If you get on Google Maps or Apple Maps, there's just black lines everywhere as the interstate is shut down anywhere remotely near my office in Atlanta. And we have had a backup who we've been able to rely upon when Jim can't make it. And he's got a new job, not in the building, and no one else knows the clock. And so thankfully, we have a hero in our WSB office in Atlanta named Jay Black, who runs Atlanta's Morning News, who is a wizard with the board, and praise Jesus, hallelujah, he was around and has been able to come in 5 minutes, figure things out to get me on the air, because holy cow, you don't see shooting on the interstate. I mean, you do, maybe in other parts of the country, but we've got a crime wave in our metro Atlanta area, and I realize for those of you everywhere in the state, not Atlanta, you're thinking, what does this have to do with me? It actually has a lot to do with you. And the reason is because Atlanta is the economic engine of the Southeast. People think of Charlotte these days because of banking. And yes, financial transactions are more likely to flow through Charlotte now than they are the Atlanta area. But the Atlanta area accounts for something like 40% of the gross domestic output of the Southeast United States. And that includes Charleston and Birmingham and Charlotte and the Raleigh-Durham area. The Atlanta metropolitan area is massive, and Hartsfield-Jackson Two Dead Mayors International Airport in Atlanta is the economic driver of the Southeast. It is solely controlled by the mayor of the city of Atlanta. I don't know that any of you realize that even the city council in Atlanta has no oversight over the airport. It is the mayor of Atlanta appoints someone without consent of the city council to oversee the airport. That person then appoints everyone else. They tend to be cronies of the mayor of Atlanta, which is why mayors of Atlanta are constantly under federal investigation for corruption. And Mayor Bottoms actually came in, promised to be a reformer, seemed to be pretty competent, and as far as the airport goes, has actually been pretty decent. But on everything else, she's running the city into the ground, including crime. So while you may live in Dalton or Rome or Clarksville or Athens or down in Brunswick or Valdosta or Macon where I am and not have to deal with Atlanta, the economic impact of Atlanta affects all of us, and we're having businesses start to say, why are we thinking of moving to Atlanta? It's turning into a third world hellhole. Well, this morning, you've got the interstate shut down in Atlanta because of a shooting on the interstate. One of the phenomena that they've got up there, it's the most bizarre thing when you drive. It really is like going to another country these days. You go up to Atlanta, and there are young men in the intersections when you come off the interstate trying to sell you bottles of water. And in more than one instance, they've been shot at. They've harassed people. And just on it goes. It's the most bizarre situation. And one of the crazy weird things about all of this is that the mayor of Atlanta seems to take the position that she is either not responsible, one, or two, that we've just got to do a different way of thinking about things. And I'm sorry, it's real hard to do a different way of thinking about things when what we had worked, there wasn't this massive crime wave, and now suddenly there is this massive crime wave around the city. Burglaries are up, I think, 50%. Assault and battery is up 75%. Murder is up. Gun violence is up. All of these things, and that is all inside Atlanta, inside the perimeter, and that has a ripple effect for every single other person in Georgia. Now, the reason I spend so much time on this, other than the start of the show, is because the legislature is at this point constantly trying to figure out ways to extricate Atlanta from those issues that have direct impact on the finances of the state. And that includes the airport. And I should say, if you hear my dog barking, there is someone on my front porch banging on the windows, and I have no idea who it is. And the dog is going nuts. So this is the sort of day that we've got here starting the program today. But now let's get back to this airport issue. I wasn't even going to start here, but given the circumstances of this morning in Atlanta, it's worth doing. There are a number of senators and representatives in our state legislature who are looking at divesting the state's or the city's control of Two Dead Mayors International Airport. And the reason is because if the mayor of Atlanta is corrupt, that corruption is going to flow into the airport. And this mayor has a lot of faults. And I want to be clear here about Keisha Lance Bottoms. She's not the great reformer I was hoping she would be after Kasim Reed. She's done some good in the city. In particular, the good she's done has been in cleaning up issues at the airport. But everything else has been a distraction to her. The police no longer trust her. Crime is going up and all that. But on the particular issue of the airport, she's actually done a good job. But this just shows how Atlanta holds our entire state hostage. And as the metro Atlanta area continues to grow in population, it's going to be an even bigger problem, which is one reason I think the legislature, when they get into redistricting, they're going to need to give serious thought on how can they neutralize some of the Atlanta impact through representation in the legislature. They can't add seats and things like that. What they can do, though, is they can take pockets of Atlanta and try to diversify them with the suburbs so that we're not all hostage to the people of Atlanta for our control of the airport and our economic input in the state of Georgia. There are real problems when it comes to Atlanta being that dominant. And, we're seeing this in other places. You go to California, for example, the San Francisco and the Los Angeles areas are so populous and dominant that entire social policies of those states revolve around the activists of those two cities. And so a city like San Diego frequently gets ignored. But more importantly, all the inland valley people in California are totally ignored. They don't have the population representation of the legislature. And the legislature says, well, all of our people, they live on the coast and we got to represent the coast, except you got a massive farming population in the inland in California that people forget about. And those farmers are often impacted by the environmental policies of the people on the coast. And those farmers have to produce the food to feed the people on the coast who can't seem to process that those farmers need to be taken care of. Or you've got the people of Illinois. The people of Illinois are completely held hostage to the people of Chicago. Chicago is the dominant political force in Illinois, and you've got all these people spread out through the entire state of Illinois who are captive to the whims of Chicago. So my mother-in-law is from Southern Illinois. She says eggs, not eggs. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful person. I have been to Southern Illinois, to El Dorado, to her family once for a family reunion. They have a family reunion the Saturday closest to the 4th of July every year. And we've gone up there before, and you cross over, you go through Kentucky, Western Kentucky, you cross a bridge, and you're basically plop smack in the middle of Southern Illinois and El Dorado. Farms everywhere, cornfields everywhere. I saw more Confederate battle flags in that area of Southern Illinois than I've ever seen anywhere in Georgia. I mean, it is the Confederacy controlled by Chicago. Historically in the Civil War, there were a bunch of Copperheads in Chicago who wanted to break away. And you can see why when you get to Southern Illinois. And it's a beautiful country, but my goodness gracious, it was a complete surprise to me. I am, to some degree, closer to Southern Illinois, where if you're in Atlanta, you are closer to Southern Illinois than Southern Illinois is to Northern Chicago. And that Chicago area there, which is, not far from Wisconsin, dominates the rest of the state. And the economic whims and the economic corruption of Chicago impact the rest of that state. Did you know I heard some bizarre story the other day that Illinois has some bizarre scheme for, yet again, homeschool parents trying to force homeschool parents into unionization. It's crazy. And then there was some other Chicago plan they wanted for their entire state. You know, Illinois has lost more people per capita than any other state of the nation, and they don't seem to learn their lesson. Now, that's a roundabout way of saying I think there's got to be some thoughtful conservative strategy to try to mitigate the areas in states like Illinois or California, or now Georgia with Atlanta growing like it is, to make sure that the people in urban areas at least have some respect for the people in rural areas. Because the people in urban areas may think they don't need the people in rural areas. And in fact, there's a progressive idea that we should put policies in place to try to get all the people from rural areas to come to the urban areas. No, you got to respect all areas and the boundaries and everything else. And unfortunately, increasingly progressives are urban fans, and they think the rest of us should be as well. If anything, what we can see from this global pandemic is that urban areas aren't necessarily the best areas for people to live. Now, I get in trouble when I say this, but there's a theology of cities in Scripture if you read from beginning to end, and it's not very favorable. Bad things tend to happen in the cities. God's people tend to live out in the country. But, you know, you can kind of see this to some degree in the reverse in the Roman Empire. I realize this is random. In the Roman Empire, though, it was the cities that were the first to convert to Christianity because it gave them access to power and influence. It actually was the rural parts of the Roman Empire that had the hardest time converting to Christianity. But what you also saw is in that conversion, when the rural parts did convert, they were more authentic conversions. You see this very much in public policy, that urban areas, wokeism is rampant in urban areas because wokeism is the modern orthodoxy. And so people in urban areas are rapidly willing to convert so that they have access to power. And that was what was happening in the Roman Empire. It wasn't authentic conversions to Christianity. It was just, hey, this is going to get us close to the emperor. Let's convert. And it's you see this then urban push out into rural areas to force their will on rural areas, not recognizing we live in symbiotic relationship. We need to respect each other's differences, and people in rural areas sometimes don't want to respect urban areas and vice versa. All of this comes back to a shooting on the interstate this morning in Atlanta, where my poor board op, Jim, is still stuck because at 5 o'clock this morning, someone died in gunfire on the interstate, apparently walking on the interstate. It wasn't cars, people walking. And it's just another reminder that city public policy can impact all sorts of people. And as our legislature is meeting, they continue to have to deal with the ramifications of Atlanta growing. Crime, schools, transportation policy, pollution, jobs. What do we do to get people out of the city? And I don't know that we've got great solutions. Although here in Middle Georgia on Monday, Governor Kemp was here and announced with a massive initiative that they're going to start a major broadband expansion for rural parts of Middle Georgia. And again, part of this is part of the thinking here is that you have a lot of people now who have jobs on the south side of Atlanta, and maybe you can pull them even further south if they had better technology infrastructure. For example, there's a property where I don't have the money right now. I haven't won the lottery, and this show, by the way, if you want to advertise on the show, drop us a line. I could use some because I'm not making any money off of this one. But I mean, I would do this for the rest of my life, even if I didn't. I love it. But nonetheless, I'd like to earn revenue off this show. And there's a farm for sale north of me, and it's 10 minutes north of me. I've got 1 gigabit AT&T fiber in my house and a Cox business line in my house. 10 minutes north of me, you can't get more than 3 megabits from a cable company. You start expanding that area, you incentivize people then to further move out. And when they move out, maybe you attract jobs there. But at this point, technology is king, and we're going to have to figure that out. And the people in Atlanta need to be mindful that you may love your city, but a lot of people don't. And you could make those people a little happier and less confrontational if maybe we figured out a way to give them some technology infrastructure and attract some of the businesses away from Atlanta so businesses could open today without their employees being stuck on the interstate because some people decided to shoot each other.
I really do like his opinion on things.
Welcome back. It is Erick Erickson here. The phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. All right, hey, look, I gotta, this one I feel compelled to do while we're having all the issues we're having this morning. We could all use a laugh. Have y'all heard about this poor lawyer? You can tell by his voice, the man is an older guy. And I wish we were doing this on like a TV, because this is it is so funny. This poor lawyer, judges and lawyers are having to get used to technology now in ways they used to not have to be. I'll tell you a great story as a tangent to set you up for this. When I was a lawyer, I did everything myself. I did all my own typing. I did everything myself, and went through several assistants and finally got to one who literally came into my office one day with a butcher's knife and severed the cable from my keyboard to my computer and said, "Learn to dictate. This is job security." So I watched. I kind of fell out of it after a while, but Downton Abbey was out and everybody was watching Downton Abbey when it first came out. There's a scene in the first season of it where one of the guys, one of the lords or whatever, wants to do everything himself, and finally the head of the household comes to him and says, "Listen, if you do all this stuff yourself, you're putting people out of work. These people depend on you to let them do their job, and if you do their job, then they're going to starve to death because no one's going to hire them because they've worked here forever." And it was very eye opening with me with my secretary to realize if I was doing all of my own work, what did she have to do? So I got used to dictating. I got used to handing her my billable hour sheets, and just doing the proofreading and stuff. And you divest other people. Well, a lot of lawyers at this point, because of these sorts of dependencies now, they don't get technology. And then older lawyers, it's even worse. I mean, they're still using WordPerfect, which is still better than Microsoft Word. And now they're having to use Zoom, and they're 60 years old, and they have no idea what they're doing. And this poor lawyer, who is clearly older, has a kitten filter on Zoom. I didn't even know Zoom had kitten filters. And so when he's talking, it really looks like a cat is talking with its mouth moving.
Ponton, I believe you have a filter turned on in the video settings. You might want to take a look.
Can you hear me, Judge?
I can hear you. I think it's a filter.
It is, and I don't know how to remove it. I've got my assistant here. She's trying to, but I'm prepared to go forward with it. I'm here live. I'm not a cat.
I can see that.
The guy, I mean, it really looked like a little white kitten was talking with its mouth. I mean, this thing is going viral, and you know the great thing is that it wasn't casual. Nobody's ever going to know who this guy is. Tomorrow, this lawyer can walk down the street and no one will have any clue that was Catman. Feels so bad for the guy though. But you can hear you can hear it in the voices. The judge is younger than the lawyer, and man, these things happen more and more. Or you get into you get into pulling a Toobin where Jeffrey Toobin is in his office and doesn't realize you can't mute your video, Jeffrey, and decides to start playing with himself rather explicitly. Holy moly, this is well, you know, these things happen. Technology, y'all, technology. I deal with my kids with this now too because things have changed from when I was a kid, and they're now engaged. We've got so much stuff blocked in our house. We use a little device called a Circle. You can get them at Best Buy. You get them online, and it can restrict. So you can't get TikTok at our house. You can't get Snapchat at our house. I'm the only one who can get into Twitter at our house. We just shut all this stuff down because I don't want my kids there. I don't want them dealing with this stuff, and I want them wise in how they deal with things. And these poor people who are being thrust into this and are older, they can't figure out how to turn off their cat filters, and they're going viral on the internet while they're in court trying to have hearings. God help them. Hello there. It is Erick Erickson here. Y'all, it's been a morning. It's been a morning. And I'm glad to have you with me. For those of you listening on delay, you can say it's been an afternoon, but holy cow. What is it that from Jurassic Park, a butterfly flapping its wings in Japan causes a hurricane in the Atlantic or some such, or the typhoon, or the butterfly effect of a shooting on the interstate in Atlanta this morning. It's got everything out of whack. Now, I believe I can begin where I wanted to begin, but you know what? I think what I'm going to do is actually go to the stuff that I was going to talk about later in the show and talk about it now instead, because it's on my mind, because I was chatting about it right before the show, which is normally how this works. We need to reopen the schools, and the Biden administration now has a goal on how they want to open the schools, and you should listen to this goal, and we can all laugh at them together.
Goal of opening up schools swiftly and safely. Mm-hmm. Could you help us understand what the White House is, or what the president's definition of open schools is? Does it mean teachers in classroom teaching, students in classroom, or does it just mean kids in classroom with a remote screen? Help us understand.
Sure. His goal that he set is to have the majority of schools, so more than 50%, open by day 100 of his presidency. And that means some teaching in classrooms. So at least one day a week. Hopefully it's more. And obviously it is as much as is safe in each school and local district.
When you say some teaching, you didn't use the same majority qualifier there. You just have to have some teaching in school, some teachers in school, not the majority of teachers in school and the majority of classrooms.
Well, teaching at least one day a week in the majority of schools by day 100.
And that's in-person teaching.
In-person teaching, yes.
In-person teaching, okay. 50% of our schools open at least one day a week. Guess what? We've already met the goal. Nationwide, public schools, slightly more than 50%, are meeting at least once a week. And but the problem here is that that's not enough. And the science says and shows that schools can and should be open. Let me talk about my kid's school. I'm actually very proud of what my kid's school has done. And I want to give you a little bit of backstory here, in that my kids go to an actual Christian school. And I say that specifically, and I don't care if it offends some people, because my kids were in a school that was purported to be a Christian school, and there is no difference between it and any of the secular schools in town. I actually did mock trial training at a school in town that was not a Christian school. It was a very well-to-do private school back when I was a lawyer, and I was really shocked at the open conversations about the rich high school kids, all of whom had vehicles more expensive than mine as teenagers. This was in the early 2000s, and they were talking about which students were sleeping with teachers, and what drugs were being done in the school. And nowadays, I've heard just all sorts of stories about amateur porn and the like among students, and trade. It is a secular school of very wealthy people. And they live a hedonistic lifestyle, many of them, and it's unfortunate. We chose to send our kids to a school affiliated with our church, thinking, we want our kids to get an education that also reflects our values, and I'm just deeply appalled. We wound up having to move our kids. The school, as a wanting the money, I think, decided to be missional and open the doors to everyone as a way to get money, but claimed they were trying to save souls and be missional, and the exterior culture actually, I think, has changed the school more than the school has changed the culture. It was unfortunate. We moved our kids. We had a number of issues with discipline and other things, and our kids are now in a school that is explicitly a Christian school. We had to be interviewed on our faith before we were even allowed into the school. The school had to allow us. Well, one of the consequences of this is that this school oftentimes is set apart from the other private schools in our community. There are a number. some of which are legitimately private schools that came about because of failures of public schools, some because of they wanted Christian education, and some because they didn't like integration back in the 60s. But we got a number of private schools in town, and they're all very good, and they all tend to work well and collaborate together, and they just kind of keep our kids' school off to the side, because ours is not like, for example, the kids' old school used Common Core math and used the Common Core program. So the kids were encouraged to read, but discouraged to read anything that might actually challenge them because they couldn't get as many AR points. The current school is all about the quality of the books they're reading. Both of my kids are now on grade levels far beyond where they actually are in terms of reading level because of the school. Classical education, they learn Latin. Christian education, they go through apologetics, they go through systematic theology, learning hermeneutics, and learning with the difference between exegesis, eisegesis, all these things you learn in a Christian school. I mean, stuff I'm learning in seminary. My kids are learning in elementary and in secondary school. Very much love this school. When all the private schools were getting together, coming up with their plans, they didn't really even invite our school to participate. And so our school had to do it themselves. And I think they've come up with a better plan than everybody else, and it's worked. And the public schools here have gone back and forth on being in school. And let me just tell you what our school did. And I think it makes a lot of sense. And there are some public schools doing very similar things. The school opened in August. They opened a couple of weeks late and spent a lot of time in the run-up to opening educating everyone. You must wear a mask in school. The cafeteria is shut down. There are no communal gathering places. They shift the halls around so that you don't have a lot of kids crowded in halls. Kids who drive to school or old enough to drive to school, they release them a little early so that they're out of the hallways before the next wave of kids come in the high school. In the elementary school, kids are spaced out for parental pickup. We don't have buses. Regarding buses and stuff, there are no shared buses and field trips and carpools right now. We don't do that. Every kid is monitored when they come in. They take their temperature at the door. They've got to wear their mask. If anybody is sick for any reason, no questions asked, no punishment, no penalty for missing work or missing school. Just stay home. If you don't feel good, stay home. You can remote learn your class. You can, if you're a teacher, you can video into your class. If you've got to be home, they'll have somebody in class monitoring the class while you're trying to do lessons over video. And if you have a fever, then you can't come back until you get a COVID negative test. They monitor everyone, and they are very open with all of us. While they don't use names, they let us know. We get emails all the time. We had an incident. It was a student. The student brought the virus in. We've asked the students that they came into contact with to remote learn for the next 2 weeks. They'll remote learn for the next 2 weeks. We haven't had any other spread. At one point, there were a number of people who all came who were sick. They couldn't trace it to being spread at school. They didn't want it to spread at school, so they shut down the high school, sent to them to remote learning for a week while the elementary and the middle school continued to meet. It is a very, very thoughtful approach. It is a very, very thoughtful, systematic approach. It involves a lot of education. Now, being a private Christian school in the South, there are some people who haven't bought into the idea of masks. Doesn't matter. Everybody's going to wear masks. And they've explained the science. They enforce it. They do a good job. And the result is that the high school went on remote learning for, I think, 2 weeks. They left a week early for Christmas vacation because, after Thanksgiving, there was that big spread. And it was starting to be in our local community. The numbers were rapidly going up. They just knew based on the odds that it was going to start going up among the school population. So they just went on and shut down early, a week early for Christmas. They didn't make us come back early or anything. We just got that extra time. The kids obviously loved it. And my kids, there have been a couple of times where, for example, my daughter has not felt well. She didn't have fever, but she had just not feeling really well. And she was able to stay home and get on Microsoft Teams and connect in video chat with her class instead of having to go to school. They've made it very easy. And they've done a very good job. And information is key. One of the things that I think people forget, and I don't know, this seems like it should be a no-brainer to me, and I'm learning there are oftentimes things I think are common sense that other people don't. And it is that we live in an age of work ethic, and I think we should live in an age of work ethic. But concurrent to living in an age of work ethic, we also have to understand we're in a global pandemic. And there are people who don't feel well, and they feel like, well, by God, I got to go to work today. I don't care that I feel bad. I've got a great work ethic. I'm going to work. And in an age of pandemic, you need to say, whoa, buddy, stay home, work remotely, no penalty. We're doing this so I do this show, and it's my show, but then I do a show in the evening for WSB in Atlanta with Cox Media Group, and they're doing something very similar there. They don't want people to feel like they've got to show up and be seen at work to avoid a layoff or something. So that they're just telling everybody, stay home. If you don't feel well at all, just work remotely. And I do think it's somewhat incumbent on employers right now to disincentivize layoff culture in corporations so people don't feel like they got to show up and be seen. But at this local level, all the teachers and the students know. The teachers know they're not going to get their vacation time docked. They're not going to get sick days docked. If they got to stay home, that's just all of the, you've got X number of sick days is kind of out the window this year. We don't want you to show up at your office if you feel in the slightest bit sick. We will make it so you can remote in, you can do video conference, whatever you need to do. And I think we need to think thoughtfully of that. And, we actually are in the 21st century for most people's jobs now. There should be less demand on you got to show up and be seen at the office if you can do it remotely. I work out of my house. I've worked out of my house now since 2006, I guess. There are days I've got an office in Atlanta. I would love to have an office in Macon. If I can boost the ad revenue from this program before I start paying myself a salary, I want an office. I want an office because I think I can do better live streams. I think I can do more stuff. You won't hear the dog barking in the background or the guy with the weed blower on the front porch on occasion. I think it would be better. But I'm not there yet, and I'm used to working out of my house, and I have been. The only times I have trouble are during the summer when the kids are home and they want dad time, and I got to be on radio for 5 hours. And they've got a hard time processing that sometimes. Why are you always working? But I do think we're at the point where the 9-to-5 job, probably we're realizing in the pandemic that a lot of us are in jobs where we can have more flexibility and don't necessarily need to be in the office. Now, I don't know what that does to the great real estate situation with office real estate. I've kind of divested myself from some real estate investments, in real estate investment trust REITs, because I don't know about the long term of the office environment. WeWork, that they were going to have their big IPO. Their CEO turned out to be weird and had issues, but there are other companies that do like WeWork. If you're not familiar with WeWork is a company, particularly in metropolitan areas. They rent out office space in big buildings, and then they sublease it to individuals who need to get out of the house. They want an office. They don't need a whole office. They just need their own little place to go work. I would love a WeWork situation where I am. But although I probably need more office space than that. But yeah, it's what's going to happen to this stuff. And then that gets us back to schools. We're probably at the point where we need to rethink the modern architecture of schools and how they operate. Like my kid's school, they don't use the cafeteria anymore. It's wasted space. They've got to eat in their classrooms. They can't. Now, hopefully, when we get through the virus, we'll be able to go back to that. But they got to bring their own lunches, and they got to eat in their classroom. They can't eat in a communal cafeteria. They want everybody socially distanced. There are rotations for bathrooms and things like that. They've done a very thoughtful approach. For the Biden administration to come in and say, we want 50% of schools open at least one day a week, when we're already doing that, they're setting goals that are stupid goals because they're not even achieving them. They've already been achieved. And now they want to take the credit of other people. But what they don't want to do is they don't want to push anyone who's a special interest. And right now, teachers' unions don't want anyone to go back to school, even though in a lot of places teachers are getting the vaccine. And in every place, we know for certain that schools are not areas of transmission for the virus. They are not vectors of transmission. No elementary or secondary school has been a vector of transmission for the virus. We can document the cases in elementary and secondary schools. We know where they're coming from all over Georgia and elsewhere. We know people aren't spreading the virus in schools. And yet they don't want to go to school. They want to hold it hostage to further demands. this isn't a sustainable situation, and that the Biden administration is siding with the teachers unions instead of with the parents is a real problem. And it is a problem that we're going to have to manage. We're going to have to deal with this. The Biden administration has no willingness to deal with it because they're captured by the teachers unions. Teachers unions spent more money to get Joe Biden elected than any other constituency. He can't turn on them. But the teachers unions increasingly have turned on their parents and their children in their schools. They've increasingly gone woke. They're increasingly about democratic activism and indoctrination, not education. And they're holding everyone hostage. I forget where it was. There was a big protest by high school students the other week, yesterday, I think it was. I forget where. In Midwestern state, they had a big protest demanding to go back to school. You got high school kids having protests because they want to go back to school and be with their friends. You got the mental health toll of high school kids not being around friends. They're socially isolated. Why are our politicians putting the moneyed interest ahead of kids? This is a just real damning indictment on how the left gives lip service to money in politics is bad, and then themselves are hijacked by the highest bidder.
You can follow Erick around social media at EW.
Hello there. It is Erick Erickson here. It is 54 after the hour. Things have settled down. Oh my goodness gracious. Well, okay. I'm gonna talk. Y'all need a laugh. You've got to have a laugh. We're gonna laugh at Philip's expense. Of course, I'm gonna tell the story. Yes, I am. So so if you watch the live streams on Sunday, if you follow me on Instagram at EW Erickson, most Sunday evenings, Philip, who you hear me reference him, Philip does all the digital stuff. If you see any of the clips online, if you see stuff out on social media, Philip's in charge of that. Charlie is the boss, and Philip is in charge of all the digital stuff. And he comes over on Sunday nights, lives up the street from me. Charlie's in Atlanta. We're in Macon. And Philip comes over on Sunday nights, and we'll have a glass of bourbon or two and a cigar or two. In fact, I've actually had a couple of cigar companies have sent me boxes, like really nice boxes of cigars. So now I don't really, I'm not a big cigar guy, but on Sunday night we'll hang out on the front porch and I'll fire up a cigar on occasion, and I got to be careful with my life insurance though. But in any event, I've got a heater on my front porch, and occasionally I'll go over to Phillips and he doesn't have one of these, but you know those floor heaters that you see them at restaurants. They've got the kind of umbrella like dome on top and propane. And I've got one. I've had it for 2 years, and we put it on the front porch. It's great. When it gets cold at night, that thing gets really hot. And I finally got online. Philip couldn't find one, so I got one for him. And I found one on Amazon. It was a great price, and he's going to put it together, but I got it for him and told him the other day. So it showed up yesterday, and my wife complains about aggressive autocorrect on her phone constantly. My wife's, in fact, I had to go in and turn off her autocorrect because she was sending bizarre stuff. But, occasionally, like my wife used to work for, those of you who know Kirby Gotze, he was the president of Mercer University in Macon for years, and my wife was his assistant for 5 or 6 years. One of the greatest people on planet Earth, and her favorite boss of all time. And she one time sent him a text message, I love you, see you tonight. Well, she meant it for me. The phones these days, we have these things, and well, on top of all of that, we have aggressive autocorrect. And my wife has sent bizarre messages to people before because of autocorrect. And then last night, I'm driving down the road, go pick up dinner for folks at George Bob's, and coming back home, and I get a text message from, well, I've got CarPlay in my car. Apple ties into my car dashboard, so I don't have to read my text messages while I'm driving. Siri can speak them for me. And here is the text message that I get from my employee, Philip, who is also a friend. Mind if I come pick up the heater in the morning and bum your wife again? Do what? I assure you this is not part of his benefits package, nor do I want my wife to find anything to do with his benefits package. Mind if I come pick up the heater in the morning and bum your wife again? And then I immediately get another text, Wi-Fi. So he's got the crappy cable internet out in the country and has had to come bum my Wi-Fi, sit on the front porch and use my Wi-Fi signal to upload the videos. Siri decided, or his aggressive autocorrect on his iPhone decided he wanted to bum my wife instead of bum my Wi-Fi. Yeah, we've all had a really good laugh about this when he's fired now, by the way, fired. We'll be back. Hello and welcome. It is Erick Erickson here. The phone number, if you want to be on my show, it's my show. The phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. This hour of the program is brought to you by First Liberty Building and Loan. They are in Noonan, Georgia. They are local to those of us here in Georgia. I love them, the Frost family. If you're in Georgia politics, particularly if you're conservative, you know the Frost family, good Christian family. They've been doing this since 1993. They want to help your business. Now, if your business is a business that needs access to loans, lines of credit, capital, and we're talking six figures and higher. We're not talking little stuff. We're talking big stuff. They want to help you. They want to help you get bigger. Banks are telling so many businesses no right now. They want to help your business get to yes. They can do creative financing solutions. They're very good at what they do. This isn't for individuals. It's for businesses. And, you know, frankly, you support us by sending your business to them. Go to firstlibertyga.com. That's their website, firstlibertyga.com. Talk to the Frost family. Spend 5 minutes with them. See if they're a good fit for you. $500,000 more. If you need that for your business, go to firstlibertyga.com and talk to the Frost family. They want to help you grow your business, and they will work with you way more flexibly than your typical bank will these days. Thank you to them, by the way, for sponsoring. If you want to sponsor it, and I'm making this part of the out of the gate with people listening. If you want to advertise on this program, we literally don't have any advertisements right now except the Frost family and First Liberty. After the election, all the election advertisement, we were slammed, and now we got all sorts of available spots, and we are in every part of the state you want to be in. If you want statewide exposure here in Georgia, pretty soon we'll be doing some more national advertising and stepping across the state boundaries. And we're actually starting to move the show beyond the state of Georgia. We'll still deal with and talk about Georgia and relate it to national stories because I live here. But if you want to advertise on the program, let us know. You can go to ericericksonshow.com. We got a contact page. There's an 800 number. You can call us. You can email us. We would love to partner with you as we begin to grow this show. We want to be with you. We just picked up 5 more stations here in the state. Statesboro, Swainsboro, Vidalia, Dublin, and Carrollton. And we're continuing to grow and are talking to a few more stations in the state as well. So, this... I wasn't going to do this. No, I'll put it. That's just too self-serving. I'll do it later. I'm real time making executions in this program because I'm a professional. I will talk about this story that I was not going to talk about, but it only just hit the wires, and I didn't see it. Matthew Cotnetti, actually, from the Free Beacon and American Enterprise Institute, put it on my radar screen. This is from... this is an analysis of the Washington Post. For those of you who think it's hopeless and dire, and in fact, I mentioned the other day that Time magazine piece, and I told you guys that Time is running a piece where a bunch of progressive groups are trying to overstate and overinflate their credit for winning the election, essentially shaping advertising, absentee balloting campaigns, and the like. And there are a couple of people who are mad at me because I point out nothing they did was illegal. Nothing they did was fraudulent. You may not like it, but it's what a competent Republican campaign would have done. And the GOP didn't do this. And it's not, this is important for those of you who want to believe you're a victim. The GOP could have done these things, and they did not. They chose not to do these things. And now some of you want to believe you're a victim, and you want to extricate yourself from the process. And so what you're doing is saying, well, they stole it. It's icky. I'm done. I'm done. Screw them all. I'm done. That's where some of you are. You wanted to get out of it anyway. You don't like the fight. You think it's nasty. You're tired of it. And now you're saying, well, they stole it. It's unfair. I can never win again, so I'm leaving it. That's your excuse. You're not even going to try to fight. That's what we saw in Georgia with the runoff. People just gave up. They didn't even want to try. They didn't want to test the hypothesis. They just took it as fact. And turns out they were wrong. They could have won had they showed up. We don't really know because they would have stolen it. No, you quit. You're quitters. Let me tell you something that you don't know. Republicans came within 90,000 votes nationwide of controlling all of Washington. This is the now. It's taken a while to get all the votes in. You know, only this week were 2 House races resolved, one in Iowa and one in New York, and they both went Republican. One of them by 109 votes, the one in New York. The Republicans are now 6 seats away from taking control of Congress, of the House of Representatives. Let me read you this from Aaron Blake. The 2020 election was bad for Republicans, full stop. For the first time since 1932, a president came into office with both chambers of Congress under his party's control and lost both of them and re-election. Democrats also have unified control of all 3 levers of power for the first time in a decade. That said, post-election analysis often overstates just how dire the situation is for a political party, and that is certainly the case for Republicans in 2020 as they confront their post-Trump reality. The reality is far from that. In fact, Republicans came at most 43,000 votes from winning each of the 3 levers of power, and that will surely temper any move toward drastic corrective action over former President Donald Trump. We got the final results from the last outstanding House race on Monday, with former Congresswoman Claudia Tenney returning to Congress after defeating Congressman Anthony Brindisi in New York by 109 votes. The result means the House stands at 222 to 213 in favor of the Democrats. Those numbers include 3 vacancies, for which the seats are very unlikely to change hands. The Democrats' narrow retention of the House is one of the biggest surprises of 2020. In an election in which most analysts expected the Democrats to gain seats, they wound up losing 14, including virtually all the toss-ups. While the GOP lost the presidential race and control of the Senate, we very nearly had a much different outcome. While Democrat Joe Biden won the popular vote by more than 4 points in the Electoral College, 306 to 232, the result was much closer to flipping than would suggest. Biden won the 3 decisive states, Arizona, Georgia, and Wisconsin, by 0.6% or less, which is similar to Trump's 2016 victory. If you flip fewer than 43,000 votes across those 3 states, the Electoral College is tied 269 to 269. In that case, Trump probably would have won. There are several reasons to argue that Biden has a mandate, including that he won more eligible voters than any candidate in half a century and won the highest percent for a challenger to an incumbent since 1932. But the fact remains we're not that far away from a second Trump term. The number of votes to flip the result was similar in the House. As the Cook political reporter David Wasserman notes, in light of Tenney's victory, less than 32,000 votes could have flipped the 5 seats Republicans would have needed to win the House majority. Technically, this would have required a bigger shift because Texas's 15th district was decided by nearly 3 percentage points in a low turnout district. But even just looking at percentages, Republicans could have flipped the House by moving 5 districts just 2.2 percentage points to the right. The closest of all, of course, was the Senate. Democrats won effective control of the chamber by getting to a 50-50 split and having the vice president break the tie. But even fewer votes could have led to a different result. Ultimately, about 90,000 votes in the nation could have caused everything to go in the opposite direction, from president to Senate to Congress to the House of Representatives. Now, for those of you who think, well, it's over, we're done, we're toast, we can never win again, the Democrats got it all, this is on you, and this is your victim state of mind. Republicans are killing themselves. Democrats aren't really beating Republicans so much as Republicans are beating themselves. Republicans have decided to embrace one of the worst aspects of progressivism. There is this strain within Republicanism right now and within the Republican Party that we must be just like the left in order to win. And the thing that most epitomizes the left is their collective, combined, shared view that they are all victims of an unjust system. And now Republicans have done the same thing, and they're lashing out. And the fact of the matter is that Republicans statewide did so well that they will control the drawing of a majority of the House of Representatives that should allow them back into the House of Representatives in just 2 years. If things go well for the GOP, they may very well take back the Senate in 2 years. They've got Raphael Warnock here in Georgia on the ballot in 2 years. Maybe Republicans will engage again. But more specifically, Republicans will draw state House, state Senate, and U.S. House lines that solidify majorities that they did not lose, even though so many of you think you're victims. Essentially, what the voters did in November is they took a no-jerk policy. They didn't like that Donald Trump might start a war on Twitter, or so they believed, and so they got rid of him. And they did not like that the left wanted to defund police officers, so they got rid of them. They went with Joe Biden because they didn't want drama, and they went with Republicans everywhere else because they didn't want drama. They didn't want people rioting in the streets anymore, and they didn't want Donald Trump provoking people to riot in the streets anymore. They got rid of everybody, cause and effect. And you can look at that and say, well, look at the Time Magazine story. These progressives, they got people to censor us and silence us and change the rules and went to court, blah, blah, and you still won down ballot. Enough to give you control of the House of Representatives in 2 years if you stop thinking of yourselves as victims. When Democrats win in Washington, D.C., the press tends to play it up as the biggest thing ever. Mandate. Mandate. Remember, I was just getting started in political writing in 2004. And George W. Bush beat John Kerry. In fact, George W. Bush got 51% of the vote. George W. Bush was the last Republican to win the presidency and get a majority of the votes cast. And the talking heads in the media, the nonpartisan objective analysts, the Democrats, and the reporters, was like, well, it's not really a mandate. John Kerry was just a bad candidate. There's no mandate for George Bush. The people are still very angry. Look at the exit poll. There's no mandate. Barack Obama wins, and of course there's a mandate. Democrats win, and there's a mandate. Donald Trump wins. Well, he lost the popular vote. There's no mandate for him. Joe Biden wins. Well, look, I mean, biggest turnover ever. They're a huge mandate for him. Pay no attention to the fact that he got the Electoral College by 0.6% or less in the 3 states he needed, and the Republicans swept everything down ballot. There's really no mandate for the Democrats. The media will tell you there is, because we do have to acknowledge we are not victims. Life is not fair. The media is controlled by the Democrats. The Democrats and the media live in a symbiotic relationship inside a hermetically sealed bubble of arrogant elitism with skinny genes, where eventually they will be neutered by themselves in their skinny genes and not be able to procreate, and we will be dominant forever because, well, when you wear skinny jeans that long, it cuts off circulation to parts that matter. And, of course, when you are able to have kids, you then kill them in abortion. So I wouldn't worry about it long term. Long term, demographically, this country is going to be a bunch of Christian Hispanic country music listeners, and they'll all vote conservative because the Democrats they're either having gay marriages where they're not having kids because biology, or they're just not getting married and not having kids, or they're not getting married or getting married and they're having kids and killing those kids. So Republican conservatives, Christians, Hispanic conservatives are procreating at a more rapid clip than the typical elitist white Democrat secular atheist. I'm really not worried about this. And by the way, I've read to the end of the book. This country is only temporary, and you got to be on Jesus's team. And, well, I feel okay about myself. I hope you do as well. Stop thinking of yourself as a victim. You're not a victim. You lost an election. You lose elections. Elections get lost. The deck was stacked against you because life's not fair, but Democrats win when the deck's stacked against you. And you know what? Republicans win when the deck is stacked against Republicans too. There's never been a time that the media was not against the GOP in my lifetime. The media was hostile to Ronald Reagan, and he kept winning. The media practically wanted to kill Monica Lewinsky because they wanted the cigars. They didn't want Monica to have them. I mean, you had the men in the press practically shaving their nether regions for Bill Clinton, and the Republicans won in 94. The Republicans won in 2000. George W. Bush got reelected in 2004. The Republicans took back the House in 2010. They took back the Senate in 2014. They took back the White House in 2016. And the media has been against them every step of the way. The Democrats have used the media to censor stories, change stories, focus on stories, alter stories, every step of the way. Remember Andrew Rosenthal, who went on to be the editor of the New York Times? He was a reporter for the New York Times in 1992 and told everyone that George H.W. Bush had used a scanner And it was a common run-of-the-mill grocery store scanner, and George H.W. Bush was so out of touch with America, he had no idea what it was. And yet it turned out he lied. The story wasn't true. It was a special type of grocery store scanner that has only recently been introduced into the marketplace. The type of scanner at grocery store checkout that weighs the vegetables and stuff, the auto scanners where you don't actually need the people, we've only started seeing those in the last decade at most recent. It was a brand new technology. Andrew Rosenthal made up the story. We know he made it up. The New York Times never corrected it. It was used by Bill Clinton to shift the election. Clinton won, and 2 years later, the Republicans came back strong. For the first time in 40 years, took back Congress. The difference between then and now is that in 1992, the Republicans accepted that the media is always out to get us, and we just have to fight harder. And this time, Republicans curled up in the fetal position, said, we're just going to mean tweet. We're not going to fight. And now we're just victims. You know what? You're not a victim. You are not a victim unless you choose to be a victim, and too many of you are choosing to be victims. And victim mentality means you perpetuate victimhood, which means you keep yourself losing, and I don't want to lose to Stacey Abrams. And this data shows me 90,000 votes nationwide could have put the Republicans in charge of everything. In Georgia, 90,000 votes would have given you David Perdue, and Kelly Loeffler only needed, 110,000 votes? And 400,000 Republicans at home. Stop being a victim. You're not a victim. Stop embracing the worst aspects of progressivism. Why? Because progressivism got rejected by voters in November down ballot, and we have a chance to clean their clock in 2 years if you'll just get your head back in the game. And if you hate me for saying it, I'm sorry. I love you, but you need some tough love and a quick, swift kick in the butt.
You can follow Erick around social media at
Hi there. It is Erick Erickson. Our phones are open, operational, working, and our call screener is not killing hogs today. So you can call in 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. I've got a new recipe going out right around noon time today. If you want the recipe, text the word recipe to 33777. I guess I should tell you what it is, huh? I had to switch the email program. This is so unprofessional. I want to talk about British Airways because there's actually a cool Georgia story about British Airways, one of my favorite airlines. I wish that British Airways was in SkyTeam because then I could use my Delta points, but it's not. And it needs to be Natchitoches meat pies. It's going out today at noon. That's the recipe. Okay, so there's a place in Louisiana. It is Yankee, Louisiana. Why? Because it's north of I-10 in Louisiana. North of the Baton Rouge area. It is northwest, kind of mid-state West Louisiana. Natchitoches. It looks like Natchitoches. There's a Texas Natchitoches, but this is Natchitoches. That's how you can tell natives of Louisiana. We say Natchitoches, and it is a staple recipe from Natchitoches. And it's meat pies. And I actually bake mine. I rarely fry them because I think they're just as good baked. But it's like a Louisiana empanada. It is a meat pie. Oh, it's so good. They're so good. You should get them. What you do is you you text the word recipe to 33777, and you can get my Natchitoches meat pie recipe. It's good. I actually modified it a little bit from a garden and gun recipe. Oh, it's so good. Okay, British Airways. It's partnering with a Georgia plant that plans to produce sustainable jet fuel. There's a company here, Freedom Pines Fuel. It's run by LanzaJet, a fuel technology startup, and British Airways is partnering with them. They want to convert sustainably sourced ethanol into sustainable aviation fuel using a patented chemical process. The ethanol can be made from non-edible agricultural waste like pine straw and recycled pollution. What on earth is recycled pollution? I don't know. Production of sustainable aviation fuel is expected to start in early 2022. British Airways will start purchasing the fuel to power flights later that year. The plant is located in Soperton, south of Macon, as part of the partnership. So, can you really say that Soperton is south of Macon? No. I don't know that you can say Soperton is south of Macon. You can say it is southeast of Macon. It's more south of Dublin than it's south of Macon, but nonetheless, British Airways is going to start putting recycled poop, essentially, and pine straw in its planes to fly around the world. Good for them, I guess. Hello, it is Erick Erickson. Those of you on my affiliate, WCHM in Clarksville, Georgia, I'm giving you a heads up and fair warning. You may see me at some point. I don't know when, but a buddy of mine, David Cannon, he's getting to be quite well-known outdoor photographer, is into fly fishing. Dick Cheney years ago insisted that I learn how to fly fish, and then I was out at lunch with Tucker Carlson some time ago, and he too insisted. They're both fly fishermen, and I've never done it. Well, my buddy David, who is local, insists as well that I learn fly fishing, and says it would be therapeutic and relaxing. And so he showed up in Macon yesterday, and basically I gave him my credit card, and we went to Ocmulgee Outfitters. There's this great outfitter place now in Macon called Ocmulgee Outfitters. Fantastic place. And we went down to Ocmulgee Outfitters, and he spent all of my money buying fly fishing gear for me, and we are headed up somewhere near Helen. No, it's not the river outside Clarksville that everybody loves except for him, but we're going to be going up there a lot. And he's dragging me up there next time because I know nothing. I know nothing about it, nothing at all. And I'm not exactly y'all have seen me. I'm not an outdoorsy person. I like to eat pizza and drink beer, and you can't do that in the woods generally comfortably. So, but he is insisting on doing it, and so I'll be up in your neck of the woods at some point soon. There's a great fly fish shop up in Clarksville that I have been to. I've actually got flies from there, but I've never done it. So if you want to go fly fishing, go to Clarksville. Now, I am going to go to a guest who had to sit through me talking about fly fishing because I'm a professional. Sarah Anderson is the director of policy for FreedomWorks, one of the greatest groups in Washington, D.C. that actually never went wobbly on principle over the last several years, which has been great. And so she is joining me from D.C. Sarah, how are you?
Hey, Eric. Thanks. Glad to be with you, and those are very, very kind words about our group. Certainly take pride in our principles, so thanks for that, and again, glad to be with you.
Well, look, I mean, it really is. I'm one of the. I guess the thing that troubles me the most over the last number of years is how many Republicans who were at one point fiscal conservative suddenly decided, well, the other side's not, so we don't have to be either, and the Republicans drove up the debt and deficit, and now you've got a Democrat-controlled Congress and a Democrat president with no spending principle either, and now they want to use a reconciliation process and try to spend even more.
Yeah, a couple of points to make on that. It's interesting you bring up Republicans' lack of ground to stand on the debt these days. Just this morning, I was watching the Senate budget nomination hearing for Neera Tanden of the Center of American Progress to lead the Office of Management and Budget. And even Lindsey Graham, the ranking member on that committee, made the point in the outset of his initial statements that, we're going to talk about the debt and deficit, but, Republicans don't have a lot of ground to stand on because we've run it up too. And that's the fault of people like himself, but it was just funny to hear him acknowledge that as well. So
at least he's honest on
a big issue, and it makes it harder for Republicans to push back on what Democrats are looking to do through reconciliation this year, when, again, they've taken away their standing on the issue as well.
Now, I've gone on and on ad nauseum about reconciliation, and let somebody else with a fresh set of lungs here explain the reconciliation process so people can actually see their host actually does know what he's talking about.
Sure. So effectively what's happening here is reconciliation is a process that allows Congress to reconcile the budget. And what that means is usually addressing mandatory spending, addressing the revenues and outlays of Congress through its power of the purse, the power to tax and spend. What's important about reconciliation really comes down to two main things, which bills passed under reconciliation only require the simple majority in the Senate. They are not subject to the 60-vote filibuster threshold. So it allows parties to put bills through without maybe reaching across the aisle, which is what we're seeing this year. The second important aspect of reconciliation is it's not supposed to accomplish policy changes, but is focused on the budget. It's called budget reconciliation, and therefore policy changes that don't have a significant budgetary impact are not allowed to be in the bill. And that's due to the Byrd rule, which is law over in the Senate.
Now,
And so that's been really a hot button issue with reconciliation because Democrats are looking to potentially raise the minimum wage, which is objectively a policy change.
and I wanted to talk to you about that one because the House just clearly doesn't care about reconciliation rules in the Senate and went on and
Right.
I think I read last night threw in $15 an hour minimum wage increase. And I guess, the Democrats are very boastful about the guy Bernie Sanders hired to try to steer financial issues past the Senate parliamentarian, and maybe they can come up with some creative way. But I don't see how you can do it, particularly now that you've even got the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office saying that it's going to raise the deficit if you do it.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's kind of a question of whether, changing the minimum wage is a policy change with a moderate budgetary impact, or if it's a budgetary change with a massive policy impact. And that'll be the question for the Senate parliamentarian. I think it's pretty clear the unfunded mandate that's placed on both states and private businesses across the entire nation that are going to have to comply with this is much greater than the budgetary impact of what the federal government, again, of course, is going to be subject to the $15 minimum wage, will have increased expenditures as a result. So it's certainly a huge debate, but you're right. The Congressional Budget Office has come out with a scathing report about the impact of a $15 minimum wage on our country, saying that people are going to lose their jobs. Of course, it's going to cost a lot of money, fewer jobs, more automation, higher costs for consumers, and job loss could even reach $2.7 million, 2.7 million jobs as a result of raising the minimum wage. So a couple of senators sent a letter to the leader of the Congressional Budget Office, Phil Swagel, asking him to study the unfunded mandate that was led by Senator Braun from Indiana. So hopefully they'll answer that call and really let us know, hey, aside from the budgetary impact, aside from the job losses, what is it going to mean for the private sector and for states too?
Well, and beyond that, obviously the minimum wage is a big issue here, but a number of the other policy advances Democrats seem to want to do, like, for example, I heard Ilhan Omar the other day take an all or nothing approach, saying that the Senate Democrats should just even throw in something like getting rid of student loan debt because that would have a stimulative effect on the economy. And it's very clear that House Democrats have no understanding of how the Senate actually works. And two, this whole grab bag of policies that they want to put in, which just doesn't seem like it's going to work. Even Joe Biden acknowledging a lot of what they want to do won't fit under reconciliation.
Yeah, absolutely. It's amazing to me to watch the Biden administration call for unity throughout the campaign, throughout his inaugural address. Democrats talking about bringing the country back together. And then what is the first thing they do? Take something that they've called for unity on, which is COVID-19 relief, and turn it into a hyper-partisan agenda issue that's basically just a wish list of progressive items, including potentially student loan debt forgiveness. Also in the bills that the House has rolled out is increased subsidies for Obamacare that they call temporary, but you and I both know there's nothing so permanent as a temporary government program. So it's COVID-19 relief, quote unquote, but it's really a wish list of progressive items that they're going to try to abuse the budget reconciliation process for, and that's pretty unfortunate.
Now, let me move back to FreedomWorks in this. With you guys we're all on the outside now looking in with the Democrats controlling everything. What's FreedomWorks' policy strategy beyond just trying to get Republicans to hold the line, particularly when it comes to something like reconciliation, where if the Democrats hold the line together, they can get anything done?
Well, I think you saw some of the strategy that I think is pretty effective is calling the Democrats bluff on a lot of these things. Obviously, the social media wing of the Democrat Party, I like to call it, or the hyper-progressive wing, has pushed a lot of their members further and further and further to the left, but that's really so far from where the Democratic base of America actually is. So what happened last week when the Senate was passing the budget resolution to set up the reconciliation bill, you saw Republicans offer a number of amendments that split the Democratic conference. Of course, Leader Schumer came back in at the end and undid a couple of those amendments in the middle of the night, which is par for the course in Washington.
Right.
But things like expressing support for the Keystone XL pipeline, things like opposing the Biden administration being able to impose carte blanche bans on fracking, stopping payments for direct payments for taxpayers, stopping those from going to illegal immigrants. Those were 3 amendments that garnered bipartisan support, dividing the Democratic conference, that Leader Schumer went back in and quickly undid at the end of the whole vote-a-rama process. So Republicans really holding Democrats' feet to the fire and saying, hey, these are the things that you've said you stand for. Are you actually going to vote for them or not? And letting constituents know that and putting them on the record is a smart angle to take.
Well, there's got to be some level of accountability. I really am glad that you guys are there doing what you're doing and holding fast to principle when so many people have gone wobbly just to get a seat at the table. It's just great to have principled people because you guys are the ones to listen to when it comes to this stuff. So, Sarah, thank you so much for joining me. And if you wouldn't mind, just tell everyone a little bit about Freedom Works so that they know where they can go and a good group they can support that's in the fight.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. Like you said, we like to stick to our principles. We're limited government, constitutional conservatives, small L libertarians, depending on who we're talking to and what the issue is at hand. But you can find us at freedomworks.org or on Facebook at facebook.com/freedomworks. Twitter, our handle is just freedomworks, all one word. And we really do believe that freedom works. So if you do too, please check us out. We have a number of videos that go out every week. I host a podcast called Part of the Disruption. And we also have a new news show that airs on Newsmax at 11 a.m. Eastern on Sundays, led by our president, Adam Brandon. So you can tune in for that as well.
That's great. And congratulations on being rid of Jason Pye.
We will miss him dearly.
Yeah, good guy. Listen, Sarah, thank you so much for stopping by. I appreciate it very much.
Thanks, Eric. Talk to you.
Is that Sarah Anderson with Freedom Works. So my buddy Jason Pye just left Freedom Works, moved to a different group. I'm going to have to get him on at some point. I give him a hard time. They really are a good group, and it's nice to have a group that's willing to fight their own side. I get a lot of criticism. I never did when Bush was president, but during the Trump years, I got a lot of criticism from people on my own side of the aisle, from the right, for wanting to hold our side accountable on fiscal issues. And I still kind of think the debt and deficit matter. And I am clearly in the minority now, and very clear a lot of people who said they were conservative never really were that conservative, maybe on social stuff, but not on fiscal stuff. But I don't want my kids to have to deal with this, and we're all going to have to deal with it. I genuinely believe that these are issues we've got to stand up and talk about and fight on, even within our own side, which is one reason I very much like Freedom Works, is because they're willing to fight that fight on our side, and I'll take all the help I can get on that issue.
You're listening to the Erick Erickson
Hello and welcome back. If you text the word recipe to 33777, you will get sometime around noon today. You got to sign up for it, though. You got to actually affirmatively go through the process and sign up. You'll get my Natchitoches meat pie recipe, native recipe of my home state of Louisiana. I guess I can call it my home. I grew up in Dubai, but I'm from Louisiana, and I've lived in Georgia since 93 when I came from Mercer. And won't be moving back to Louisiana anytime soon. But I guess that I am technically a native of Louisiana. I got to make gumbo at some point. I just need to make I need to make a giant pot of gumbo and have people share it with me. So now I must move. Speaking of cooking, I'm going to talk about cooking for a moment. The promos say sometimes we talk about cooking. I'm going to talk about cooking. Well, I'm not just going to talk about cooking, food and process. I was on Instagram last night. Instagram is my favorite social media outlet because while we put up clips from the show, by and large, I just try to, I like Instagram. I like to relate with my friends there. I've actually made very good friends on Instagram. My buddy David Cannon, who is taking me fly fishing and bought a bunch of stuff for me. Bought a bunch of stuff for me. I gave him my credit card. We went to Ocmulgee Outfitters in Macon, and he got all the stuff I needed to get started in fly fishing. But I've met a number of people who have become friends through Instagram while on the show. When I started in radio, I kind of had it in my head that if I did well at it, I probably would kind of minimize the amount of people that I would be able to make friends with. Now, occasionally, I get to be friends with people who I realize that as long as we see eye to eye, they are my friends. You can tell your real friends who you make friends on radio. They're listeners to the show and you develop a friendship with them. You can tell the ones who are really your friend because they never want to talk about your show, which is great. That they don't have issues with it. But I've met a number of people off Instagram. I love Instagram and I'm trying to be as relatable as possible. It's not my best life now. I am no Joel Osteen on Instagram. You can see my messy office and the stuff I burn when I cook, but also the other stuff. And I love to cook. And occasionally I get a lot of ads for food and foodstuffs and kitchenwares. And I got one last night. Y'all, I don't know what this is, but I'm opposed to it philosophically. It is called hop water. Sparkling hop water with adaptogens and nootropics for a balanced buzz. This is their branding. No booze, just benefits. Really? This is the tagline. The healthy alternative to beer that takes you from stressed to decompressed without the hangover. And they have a surfer is their image. This has got to be a product of California because I'd rather a beer. I'm tired of the fizzy water craze. I'm done with fizzy everything. I want a fizzy Coca-Cola and a fizzy Dr. Pepper, and I am just done with the sparkling water, fizzy water craze. Everybody and your stupid different fizzy water brands, I'm done with it. It's garbage. The other thing I'm done is char. Do you know what the appropriate synonym for char is? Burned. I was watching somebody the other day cooking, and there's an outdoor wood burning oven I'm interested in getting. And you burn the logs. There's actually a listener to this here program who wants to build me one because this product it's in the UK. You can't get it here. It's a type of outdoor grill, and it's wood burning. There's a ember box in the middle. You put logs in, you set it on fire, you wait till the embers form, and then you spread the embers out as needed in the bottom, and you cook, and you can create heat zones and stuff like that. And I want to do open fire wood cooking. I've got gas. I smoke meats. I got a big green egg. I got a pellet grill. I got a Blackstone. I want outdoor cooking on wood. I maybe use it once a month, but I still want it. I just want to cook on wood. But I was watching somebody the other day and they burned the crap out of the food. They're like, that's char. Char is good. No, it's not char. It's burned, you idiot. I've got an outdoor pizza oven. It's called a rock box. The thing gets up to 950 degrees. You can make an authentic Neapolitan style pizza. It's got a brick floor. You can use wood or gas. So you can get Neapolitan pizzas, and I will make a Neapolitan pizza. I've been promising Philip forever I'm making one, and I haven't. But I make good pizzas in this pizza oven. But the pizza oven gets so hot, you get the black spots, the char spots, and that's fine. When you make a Neapolitan pizza, there are going to be parts of the dough that actually do char, that burn. But it adds to the overall flavor. But I don't want something that's burned to a crisp. And nowadays, people just, well, let's just rebrand it as char. I don't want your char. I don't want your charred food. Do I want a steak that is more done than most people do? Yes. Do I want it to be a burnt cinder block? No. I don't understand this craze. The fizzy water craze and the burn phrase where we're going to call it char so people still eat it. Essentially, we're going to cook it so fast the outside is going to be burned to a crisp and the inside will be raw. I don't want that in chicken for certain. I really don't want it in anything. Some of these food crazes out there right now, it's like sous vide. Now listen, I know some of you love sous vide. You know what sous vide stands for? It is French for can't cook. You stick it in a vacuum sealed bag and you throw it in boiling water. That's not cooking. That's boiling it. The French and the British have done this for years. You know what people talk about British cuisine? Oh, but we're going to reverse sear it. Yeah, you're going to reverse sear it because you've got it ugly gray on the inside and then you're going to throw it on the grill to char it. Just cook the damn thing. Listen, I've tried sous vide. I've got sous vide. There are some things that are practical for sous vide, like, for example, eggs. You can put eggs in sous vide and get them hard boiled and they don't get that greenishness in the yolk. And I'm fine with that. That's fine. But the sous vide craze, it's science in the kitchen. No, it's boiling stuff, except you're controlling the water temperature. This stuff, the texture of the stuff. You know, when you actually cook something, it changes the texture. It doesn't change the texture when you're doing sous vide by and large, and I've tried it. And I know what I'm doing. I actually do know what I'm doing, and I don't like to do it. I don't know why the rest of you do too. I saw someone the other day say they were going to sous vide a Boston butt and then put it on the pellet grill. I was like, you are an idiot. It actually takes longer to sous vide it than to put it on the grill and the pellet grill. You got a pellet grill. Get a Rectech. Get a big green egg. Do something other than sous vide and then don't char it. It just these modern, crazy, silly food trends and then with their fizzy water. I don't care about your fizzy water and your LaCroix. Hipsters, give me a Dr. Pepper or a beer. I'll need your LaCroix with your pineapple flavor. All right. When we come back, we'll get back into substance. I promise. We've actually got some Georgia news we need to cover. Okay. And China. We got to talk about China. Hello and welcome. It is Erick Erickson here, the Erick Erickson Show, streaming across the internet and on radio stations all across the place. You know, I was reading Mark Cuban wants to do a podcast app where you can listen, follow along with me. This is kind of crazy. It's a podcast app where you will be able to listen to the podcaster while the podcaster is live doing their show and call them. You mean like radio? The phone number, if you want to call me, is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. And if you want, we've had one person today text the recipe. Clearly, you don't want the Natchitoches meat pies. If you text the word recipe to 33777, you can go through the process and subscribe and get the Natchitoches meat pie recipe. But I need to move on. You will notice I have not talked about impeachment today. And I don't really want to talk about impeachment. And it's kind of a nothing story. Now, listen, let me say this. If you're listening to me and you're a huge political junkie, you're a newscaster, you're in high rage about January 6th, whatever. In Chuck Schumer's own words, impeachment is a sham because they have no intention to call witnesses or provide documentation. I see no reason to cover impeachment. I see no reason to spend time on impeachment. I am in the third hour of a 3-hour radio program on the second day of impeachment, and I have not talked about it. But I now do have to talk about it, unfortunately, because I got to answer a question from now more than a dozen listeners. And I'm actually, I rarely do I get shocked by a question, and the number of people ask me about this, I realize when I have about a dozen, and it has been about a dozen people, slightly more than that, through direct messages on social media, and then several more people I found in my spam folder and email, and I've taken myself on most of the email lists to make it harder to get to me, because, man, I get some nasty hate mail, and I just don't want to see that stuff. So now everybody else on my team sees it, and I don't. So there may be more emails coming through there, but people want to know, how is it that the Senate is allowed to decide the constitutionality of something as opposed to having to go to the Supreme Court? Essentially, the Senate yesterday voted it was constitutional to proceed with impeachment. And Bill Cassidy, Republican senator from Louisiana, voted with the Democrats. And a lot of Republicans are mad at Cassidy for doing it. But Cassidy's principal point is he's not in favor of impeachment. He'll vote against impeachment. But it is constitutional because the Senate has done this before. There actually have been situations where the Senate has had a trial for the impeachment of someone, not a president, mind you, but I think it was a cabinet secretary who resigned, but was impeached before the resignation, and the Senate continued to carry on the trial of impeachment, even though that person was gone. And he voted, yes, it's constitutional. He's got a prerogative he's got an obligation to protect the Senate. But a lot of people are emailing me, and more than a dozen on Instagram and Twitter sending me direct messages saying, how can they do this? The Supreme Court's the arbiter of constitutionality. And I guess the reason I'm shocked is because it's conservatives asking me this question. You know, punting to the Supreme Court to determine the constitutionality of an issue is actually a modern construct of the late 20th century. Up until the late 20th century, the president and Congress, both houses of Congress independently, believed they had an obligation to determine constitutionality of issues. And in fact, the Supreme Court would not, in some cases, take cases if Congress had not made a determination of constitutionality. There are rare cases where that has happened. You know, when George Washington was president, the only time he vetoed anything was on constitutional grounds. In fact, historically, the first number of presidents, their vetoes were based on constitutionality grounds, not on partisan philosophical policy objectives. So overwhelmingly, their determinations were based on constitutionality. It is a very modern, late 20th century idea that the Supreme Court is the sole arbiter of constitutionalism. If you read the Federalist Papers and you read the structure of read into the structure of the Constitution, what you see is that every single branch of government has an obligation to assess constitutionality. Specifically with impeachment, the Supreme Court in the 1970s had a series of rulings, one of which was authored by then Associate Justice William Rehnquist, who would go on in the Reagan administration to become Chief Justice. And Rehnquist made it very clear that impeachment is a political process. And he wrote in the opinion that in matters that are purely political, the court itself cannot play a role, and each branch of government must determine the constitutionality of the matter. And only when the matter moves beyond the political into the realm of judicial and due process can the court get involved. So, for example, if the Senate in its trial forgoes due process, then the court can get involved and say, you've got to give due process. But impeachment itself is a purely political matter. And so the court can only get involved if the Senate itself violates the rules of the Senate. And then all the court can do is force the Senate to follow its rules. And each Senate, for each impeachment, adopts rules for that impeachment. And then they follow those rules. And so the Senate has to determine the constitutionality of the process because only the Senate can impeach. If anyone could impeach, then it would be a court issue. But courts can't impeach. So the Senate's got to do it. If the Senate finds that it is constitutional to take up an act of impeachment of a president who is out of office, then they can do it. Now, some of you can jump to the extreme conclusion and say, well, why won't the wokes, when they get power, dig up George Washington and impeach him? You know, after all, back in the medieval times, they would dig up people, try them, and declare them enemies of humanity, and then burn their ashes or throw their already dead bodies in the rivers. Well, we're not at the extremes. Maybe we will get there, but where we are right now is at a process that historically the Senate has tried people no longer in office. You cannot dispute the historic record. It has happened. You can say, well, they've never done it to a president, and that is true. But the process came forward in the 1970s when the House of Representatives was hell-bent on impeaching Richard Nixon over Watergate, and Senate Republicans made a walk down Pennsylvania Avenue and told him if they go through with it, you're going to be thrown out of office. The votes are there in the Senate to remove you from office. And so Nixon resigned. The House of Representatives never actually passed the articles of impeachment. Under the rules of the Senate, had they passed the articles of impeachment, the Senate could not have avoided it. And that's the other aspect of this. Under the rules of the Senate, if the House of Representatives impeaches someone, the Senate cannot say no. The Senate has to engage with it. So if you got a majority of the House of Representatives to draft articles of impeachment for George Washington, the Senate of the United States couldn't say, screw you, we're not doing it. They would have to hold a hearing and dismiss it within the impeachment setting within the Senate. But it's not going to happen. At some point, you do have to be willing to recognize the uniqueness of the situation, whether you want to or not. You can scream about it all you want. You can say it's unfair, but it's also a unique situation. Donald Trump himself admits his was a unique administration, and this is a unique time in American politics, but there is past precedent of the Senate actually engaging in an impeachment trial for someone who is no longer in office. That historic precedent for impeachment applies across the board. The only thing that separates the president from everyone else is that if it is the sitting president, then the Chief Justice of the United States has to preside. The only reason the Chief Justice of the United States presides when the sitting president is being impeached is because it would be a conflict of interest for the president of the Senate to preside because the president of the Senate is the vice president of the United States. And it would be really, really crummy if the vice president of the United States threw the impeachment so that the vice president could become president. So that's a conflict of interest reason with the Chief Justice. It is all branches of government coming together, essentially, when the sitting president is tried. Donald Trump is no longer the sitting president, so the Chief Justice of the United States doesn't have to do it. But again, I want to circle back to this point because I'm actually kind of amazed that as many conservatives as there are emailing and questioning me this would do so. Up until the late 20th century, every branch of government had to determine constitutionality itself. It was only in the late 20th century where Congress essentially would punt constitutional issues to the Supreme Court. And it was only in the late 20th century that the Supreme Court would allow them to do that. Up until really past Roosevelt and the New Deal, the Supreme Court wouldn't let Congress punt the issue of constitutionality. The House and the Senate had to deal with constitutionality. They couldn't just do something and then say, oh, well, we'll let the court decide if it's constitutional. Now, that's not to say they wouldn't do things that they thought were constitutional, and the Supreme Court, as the final arbiter of it, would say no. But, the Supreme Court was never even supposed to be the final arbiter of it. Each house was supposed to decide it for themselves. And that's a power grab of the Taney Court early in the history of this country, where they essentially decided they would be the final arbiters of constitutionality. And that has been our process forever. But that process of constitutionality, it only applies to laws and things everyone can do. Impeachment is solely an act of Congress. And because under the Constitution, impeachment is solely a matter for Congress, then Congress itself must be the arbiter of the constitutionality of the act, and the Supreme Court cannot get involved. And you can disagree with me on that, but it's the Supreme Court itself that said that, which is why the Senate of the United States yesterday had to take a vote on constitutionality. And it is why Senator Cassidy of Louisiana voted with the Democrats and 6 other Republicans on the issue of constitutionality. It's not because he wants to impeach the president. It's because he believes that there is historic precedent and it's constitutional for the Senate of the United States to try someone who was impeached while that person was in office. I do believe that Senator Cassidy would in fact vote against the constitutionality of impeaching someone if they were impeached when they were not in office. Though the trial is now, the impeachment happened while President Trump was still president, and that timeline matters even if you oppose impeachment. That does matter. Please be intellectually honest on this. All of us, including you Democrats, who need to recognize last year you guys said it would be a sham if there were no witnesses, and this year you're saying we're not having witnesses, which means by your own words, statements, and positions, you're doing a sham impeachment.
You can follow Erick around social media at
Listener Mark makes a great point. Let's use a hypothetical to explain this. It is January 6th of 2025. There's no storming of the Capitol, but on that day, Joe Biden takes a bribe from the Ukrainians or the Chinese or someone and cancels out a policy. Is that impeachable? If the impeachment trial can't happen before January 20th, is it impeachable? You should want Joe Biden impeached for that. And even if the trial can't happen until January 21st, when he's out of office, you should want the trial to go forward. If the impeachment happens while he is still in office, you should want it. And that's basic common sense to me. This isn't about Donald Trump. Take the president out of the equation. And the ultimate issue is you have a president of the United States who in his first term commits a high crime and misdemeanor. We'll argue about whether this was or not later, but you have a president who the majority of the House believes has committed a high crime and misdemeanor, and they impeach him while he's still in office, even though there are only a few days left. Should you not still be able to have that trial? I think you should want to have that trial. And we have historic precedent for doing that, so take Donald Trump out of the equation there. When you bring him back in, is if you alter your position when you bring back in your favorite guy, then that's on you. That's not on the principle of the matter. You can also say, well, maybe he should be. I don't want Donald Trump prosecuted. And I think there's an argument now to be said that the Democrats are going through an impeachment trial, all their threats of prosecution and stuff. Well, they're rendered moot because he's doing the moot, not mute. He's going through the impeachment trial, even if they find him not guilty. Now, to the phones we go. Jim in Clarksville. How are you, Jim?
Hey, I'm doing well, Eric. How about yourself?
Doing great. I miss you guys, by the way. I got to get back up there. I like Clarksville.
Hey, you know what? Great trout country. But you know, I actually was raised down in Warner Robins, down in your neck of the woods.
Really? So you escaped?
Yeah, I decided it was time to move out years ago, and I came home. I did all the LA thing, and but Georgia's my home, and I love the mountains, so here I am.
Good for you.
If you want to go fly fishing, I know some great spots around here. Hey, I know your screener wanted me to kind of get to the point. I'm a little bit concerned, obviously raised, steeped in a military family. I'm very familiar with, I'm not an attorney, but I'm familiar with Admiralty Maritime and Law of International Treaty of War and Peace. What I'm seeing is occupation of the Capitol by armed forces without a declared mission. And from what I understand, they're going to be there till mid-March with no objective and no declaration of what constitutes mission accomplished. Mm-hmm. The other thing that kind of concerns me is that if you're familiar with international law, it all basically goes back to the Lieber Code of 1863. And Article 1 of the Lieber Code clearly states that martial law does not need to be proclaimed or declared. Just the presence of an occupying army, an armed force, is notice enough to the people that martial law is in place. Now, without a declared mission for occupying the Capitol, and there's nobody there, Trump is gone, mm-hmm. There's no seeming revolt or anything going on up there. Why are the forces there? And is there a reason we should not regard this as a declaration of martial law by their presence?
Okay, so let me break these down for you. No, we shouldn't regard it as martial law because they are confined to the territory of Capitol Hill, and they have no policing authority. They can't impose their will on people. They really serve no purpose there right now. Actually, Byron York, it's funny you should say this. Byron York said a piece. I got it in, the Rome News Tribune has this piece out explaining that they're staying until mid-March because they're worried about the QAnon people coming back post-impeachment trial, but also they're worried because they're concerned as they start bringing the QAnon people in who are in jail in Washington for their hearings. that there may be some flamed intentions. Now, I will tell you, Tom Cotton was rapidly becoming one of my favorite sisters. I mean, he's a friend, so I'm a little biased here. Jim, I'll let you go there because we're about to head in commercial break, but I'll tell you, Cotton has come out and said it's time to send the troops home. Now, most of the Southern governors, Brian Kemp, Ron DeSantis, Greg Abbott, Henry McMaster, Bill Lee from Tennessee, they've all summoned their National Guard soldiers home. It is Maryland and Virginia that are keeping people there still. And there are reports that there may be a protest on March 4th. And the reason for the protest on March 4th is there are some of the more fringy QAnon people. Their latest conspiracy theory is that March 4th was the original inaugural day, and that is the day that Donald Trump will come back. Now, you and I can laugh about this, but a buddy of mine sent me screenshots of a Facebook thread from some folks, and they're convinced that the military is going to impose martial law and take back the country and save the republic, that Joe Biden is an illegitimate president still. And one of the reasons, one of the hilarious parts is that they turn off the lights of the White House at night because it's unoccupied. Y'all, they turn off the lights of the White House at 10:30 every night. The outside lights go off so the president can go to sleep. But people are saying this stuff. And there are people who believe it. And so they're concerned over this militia stuff. But it's not really martial law, though, because one, they've consented. They've been asked to be there. And two, they don't actually have arrest powers. The only powers the National Guard has is protection of the building. And they're starting to go home as the Capitol Police want to build this wall, which they're not going to build. Democrats and Republicans alike are opposed to the wall, but they're worried about this March 4th thing. So stupid. All of it is stupid. Stupid. 15. When we come back, we need to talk about China. Actually, there's serious issues with China we need to delve into. Hello there. It is Erick Erickson here. So I just actually got this question. Let me answer this question before I get to the China stuff I wanted to talk about. If you listen online to our live stream at ericericksonshow.com, you hear PSAs during commercial breaks. We are required to feed audio to stations so that if they don't have an ad in a particular minute of the break, they have audio and not dead air. And we can't feed stations music. And so you hear our live stream as we send it to the stations, and we can't play music during those minutes because now what I would like to do long term is do some parody, like what Rush does. But I got to get some minute long parodies and swap out the PSAs for those over time. But I don't have the budget for that. If you want to advertise on the program and help us get the budget, you can go to ericericksonshow.com and reach out, and we are happy to build an advertising relationship with you. Now, I need to talk about China because one of the things I started thinking about this morning was while the media in Washington is distracted by impeachment, what is the Biden administration going to try to get away with? What is the Biden administration going to do while everyone else is distracted by impeachment? And one of those things is a dramatic retreat, a dramatic retreat on China policy in an area that not only should they not retreat, but they need to, with gusto, rush and deal with this issue because it's not going to get any better. It's only going to get worse. And what I'm talking about is the Confucius Institutes. There are universities around this country that have Confucius Institutes. A bipartisan investigation found that the Confucius Institutes are essentially Chinese propaganda centers organized by the Chinese Communist Party, and there are all sorts of questions and issues about spying and other things. The Biden administration, this is from Chuck Ross. Chuck Ross at the Daily Caller reporting the Biden administration quietly withdrew a rule proposed by the Trump administration that would have required American schools and universities to disclose their partnerships with Confucius Institutes, which some government officials allege are front groups for Chinese Communist Party propaganda. The Trump administration submitted a proposed rule to the Department of Homeland Security on December 31st entitled Establishing Requirement for Student and Exchange Visitor Program Certified Schools to Disclose Agreements with Confucius Institutes in Classrooms. Around 500 K-12 schools and 65 colleges in the United States have partnerships with the Confucius Institute U.S. Center, a U.S.-based affiliate of the Beijing-based Confucius Institute headquarters. The institute, also known as Hanban, is affiliated with the Chinese Ministry of Education. Many of Hanban's directors, or I guess probably Wanban directors, are members of the Chinese Communist Party or have close ties to the CCP. The Trump-era proposal was withdrawn from consideration on January 26th, according to information at reginfo.gov, the website of the Office of Information Regulatory Affairs, which operates under the OMB, Office of Management and Budget. The website does not provide other information about the proposal or why it was tabled. The website does say that at any point in the review process, the proposed rule, an agency may withdraw its rule. Now, for those of you who don't know, there was a bipartisan congressional investigation. Marco Rubio and I think it was Mark Warner of Virginia were two of the loudest voices on this, that Confucius Institutes are, in fact, tools of the Chinese Communist Party. They propagandize on American campuses and in elementary and secondary schools across America. And those individuals who are recruited by them to come to this country oftentimes are ardent communists. There have also been allegations in the past that in some cases, some of these institutes may be used as fronts for spying. And Congress actually urged the Trump administration to deal with this issue, which they did. and now Biden is walking it back. And Biden's administration is doing a lot of bluster and a lot of talking tough on China, but it seems like their talk is being underscored by very weak policy towards China, bowing to China, kowtowing to China. And then there's this in the Wall Street Journal. From light bulbs to 5G, China battles West for control of vital technology standards. Nearly every product in American homes, from light bulbs to couches, windows, and Wi-Fi routers, conforms to standards and measurements of a global system established to ensure quality and seamless operation. Industrial standards, created by the U.S. and its allies over decades, form an invisible matrix of rules that underpin the global marketplace. Mundane though it may sound, this uniformity is critical to international trade in how it guarantees that bolts, USB plugs, shipping containers can all be used interchangeably worldwide. The standards reflect the consensus of international panels long dominated by Western technical experts. China now wants to take the lead in fields of the future. To the consternation of many Western countries, Beijing is employing state funding and political influence to try to define the norms for all manner of cutting-edge technologies that span telecommunications, electricity transmission, and artificial intelligence. Dominance of technical standards underpinning information and communication technologies and other emerging fields is integral to Beijing's ambition, said Congress's U.S.-China Economic and Security Review Commission in its annual report in December. China's efforts are driven by the desire to outdo the West, as well as amass profits. Standards based on patented technologies often require users to pay licensing fees. Nokia and Qualcomm, for instance, earn billions of dollars annually for patents that underpin cell phone systems made by rivals. China would rather earn that kind of money by designing standards to match technologies developed by its own companies. Standards are gaining urgency as rules are being decided for the next generation of technology dependent on 5G networks, including driverless vehicles, so-called smart cities, and the Internet of Things, advances that will connect the digital and physical worlds as never before. Now tie all of this to a third story. The FBI and the Secret Service are joined together hunting for a Florida water system suspect who hacked the city's supply and tried to load it with dangerous levels of a chemical found in drain cleaner. The FBI and the Secret Service have joined Florida law enforcement in trying to hunt down the suspect who hacked into a city's water supply and tried to load it with these dangerous levels. The hacker breached the system at the city of Oldsmar's water treatment plant last Friday using a remote access program shared by plant workers. It exposed a danger cybersecurity experts say has grown as systems become both more computerized and accessible via the internet. Authorities did not have a suspect as of Tuesday, but said they were continuing to follow leads. Investigators say it wasn't immediately clear whether the hacker was domestic or foreign. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki addressed the hacking incident on Tuesday during her briefing, acknowledging the Secret Service's involvement and saying cybersecurity was a main focus of the Biden administration. As was announced earlier today, the FBI and Secret Service are doing the investigation, she said. There's something we'd certainly defer to them on their specific findings of that investigation. I will say, broadly speaking, the president, vice president, members of our national security team are focusing on elevating cybersecurity. She did not say she would circle back, by the way. Marco Rubio, has called on the FBI to treat the investigation as a matter of national security. The hacker who breached the system managed to briefly increase the amount of sodium hydroxide by a factor of 100, according to Pinellas County Sheriff Bob Gualtieri. Sodium hydroxide, also called lye, is used to treat water acidity, but the compound is also found in cleaning supplies like soaps and drain cleaners. It can cause irritation, burns, and other complications in large quantities. Authorities say a supervisor saw the chemical being tampered with and was able to intervene and immediately reverse it. Gualtieri insisted the public was never in danger, but admitted the intruder took the sodium hydroxide up to dangerous levels. Now, Oldsmar is a city of 15,000, 15 miles from Tampa. A plant worker had noticed the unusual activity around 8 a.m. on Friday when someone briefly accessed the system. By 1:30 p.m., someone accessed it again, took control of the mouse, directed it to the software that controls water treatment, and increased the amount of sodium hydroxide by 100 times, it looks like. And he was in the system for 3 to 5 minutes and then exited the system, and the plant operator was able to control and take over. There are other safeguards that have been put in place and were in place ahead of time. This is increasingly common. We have stories now of people having their home cell networks, their Wi-Fi, remote cameras and stuff accessed and hacked. I use Apple system, which is not. So I use Apple HomeKit. We've got a number of things in our house that are Internet of Things. I can turn on the lights. For example, I can tell. In fact, I can do this. Those of you on the live stream, turn off the home studio, and the lights in my office will go out when Siri decides to comply. I can turn on and off with my phone if I need to, the lights in my office and my studio. I can do these things with the Internet of Things connected through my house, and it works quite well. But I only use the Apple system. I don't. Alexa has it as well in Google Home, and the reason I don't use those is because Apple system is very, very particular. And as a result, there aren't as many devices for it. But because it's so particular with security protocols, it's not really hackable because every single device has to have a very unique serial number and a special chip in it. And those specialized chips have security features on them, which makes it difficult. So I only use the Apple stuff in the house. Now, it's easier to find all sorts of cool things that are Alexa compatible and Google Home compatible. And now Samsung has a system I'm not very familiar with, but all of them are more generally usable, but also more easily hackable. As China is trying to expand standards and trying to use Chinese standards, particularly for 5G and technology, China increasingly stands to make our products hackable by them, to expand their police state over the internet and spy on all of us. It's one reason why TikTok is such a bad thing. So many people use TikTok, but we've exposed, or Apple was able to expose a number of vulnerabilities. And what TikTok did and how it was transmitting data back to Chinese servers. Facebook, for all of Facebook's faults, doesn't operate in China because to do so, it would have to put servers in China, and it's opposed to doing that. The Biden administration going wobbly on Confucius Institutes makes me worry they're going to go wobbly on this other stuff. They talk a really good game. They talk about wanting to take a firm line on China. They talk about recognizing President Xi's hostility towards democracy, his authoritarian bent. But actions speak louder than words. It's not just a saying, it's true. And right now, the Biden administration is talking a really good game about China and security and being firm. And when you look at their actions, they're weaseling out of all of the things Donald Trump put in place to fight China. It's not that they want to think differently and fight in different ways. It's that they're walking away from stuff that even Democrats in Congress wanted, like crackdowns on Confucius Institutes around the country. I'm deeply, deeply worried, given the Biden family's ties into China, that they're going to sell us down the river on this issue. And thus far, they're doing nothing to show otherwise, and we all need to keep an eye on this situation, but in particular on China trying to control our technology. It's going to be frightening if they're successful on this. And hopefully, if the Biden administration won't fight, members of Congress, and there seems to be bipartisan concern on this, will speak up vocally.
News and in-depth analysis from Erick
there. It's Erick Erickson here. I want to talk to you a moment about a story that is circulating and percolating. There's a story in the Washington Post. I don't even want to read from it, but basically, first, keep Rush Limbaugh in your prayers. I wouldn't be doing what I do for a living but for Rush, and I don't just mean that he started really what we know as modern talk radio came from Rush Limbaugh. Really did. I grew up listening to Paul Harvey. My dad, it was the one time of the day you had to be quiet in our house if you really didn't want to get in trouble. Was my dad loved Paul Harvey, and Paul Harvey delivered a newscast for years. And I got asked to do an endorsement the other day on radio for CBD, and I'm skeptical of it. And one of the things that I thought was cool with Paul Harvey is that as a kid, I really believed he must have that Renai water heater. He must use those vitamins. Paul Harvey must be a customer. He talks about these things. And whether it was true or not, I kind of do that. Like I endorse on my evening radio show Omaha Steaks. And I've been a longtime customer of Omaha Steaks. It was Sherry's Berries. A lot of stuff I heard growing up, Rush Limbaugh, Sean Hannity, and others pitch. And now I'm on radio. And man, I'm actually a customer. And I don't want to pitch products on air myself that I don't believe in. That's why I'm totally happy telling you guys to go to First Liberty Building and Loan, because I know the Frost family. I know how good they are. I know the reputation in the business. So I can tell you that and be sincere in it and not just try to sell you something because they're giving me money. And Paul Harvey was that sort of way, but Paul Harvey was not the talk radio guy. Rush Limbaugh was. And Rush, as you know, has lung cancer. He and my wife have very similar sorts of lung cancer. I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing, not just because Rush made talk radio, but because Rush actually told me he'd never speak to me again if I didn't take a job in radio when WSB came calling. I had known him through writing at Red State over time. We had met in person, and he was very encouraging to me in my career, first to go to CNN, then to go to Fox, and also to get on radio. And just keep him in your prayers, please. He's got cancer. But for years, there have been recycled stories of the death of talk radio is upon us. And now they're tying it to Rush Limbaugh's health, which I just find ghoulish to begin with. What's it going to be like after Rush, and on and on and on? Well, there will never be another Rush Limbaugh. Rush Limbaugh is the best in the business. And for the longest time, I did not want a syndicated radio show while I was filling in as Rush, as a guest host for Rush. I would rather fill in for him once a year than have my own show. And now I actually have my own show. It is syndicated, and we're still friends. And look, I get it. I differ from a lot of Rush's audience on my views of the outcome of the election. And I think they would be mad as hell if I got behind the microphone, even as we would agree with 90% of stuff. And I get that. I'm his number one fan. I love him dearly. And Snerdley and the whole crew, they're fantastic people at the top of their game. And it's ghoulish to try to tie the death of talk radio to Rush's health. But I've been in talk radio now for 10 years, and the death of talk radio stories have been out since well before that. I mean, since I was in high school, as Rush Limbaugh was getting started, they're like, it'll never last. And then it lasted. You just wait. It reminds me of the stories of Demography is Destiny. Starting with Richard Nixon's reelection in 1972, stories started coming out in the mainstream press. Well, with demography in this country, the Republicans, they're not going to win anymore. They'll never win again. And every time, demography. And then you've got Donald Trump. He loses, but not by a lot. And you see the shift of black and Hispanic. Well, it wasn't enough. I mean, demography is still destiny. No, it's only destiny if you believe it. Talk radio is only dead if you believe it. Now, listen, I don't know that I will ever get $150 million radio contract. I want to be a nationally syndicated host. I would like to make money off this program, which I currently don't do. We break even. I would like to be a nationally syndicated host. I'd love one day, 10, 15 years from now when Rush retires, to do noon to 3. But I don't think talk radio is going away. It doesn't mean it's going to stay in the same form. The same people who do this are also, TV is going to go away as well. So now we're at this point where you're going bankrupt $5 a time getting your You got your Netflix service, your HBO service, your ABC service, your CBS, now Paramount Plus service, your Apple TV Plus service, your Hulu service. All of these things, there used to be this thing called cable. And then technology evolved where you could record shows and watch them. Now we've got on demand, and on demand was going to kill stuff. And now we've come full circle. Well, now you've got the Mark Cuban system where they want to do podcasts, but they're live podcasts where you can call in and talk to the people who are on the podcast. I don't believe talk radio is going to stay stagnant. I don't think it's going to be static. I think it's going to evolve over time, but it's not going to disappear. There will always be radio frequencies, and there will always be radio stations, and there will always be people stuck in their car. Maybe not as many will access it live. Some will listen to it in podcasts. Some will listen to it over satellite. But I still think there will be a demand for good radio show hosts. And I'm not just saying this in a self-serving way. I just think the death of radio has been overstated forever. Technology changes, and I think you've got an obligation to adapt to that technology. Radio will change. Newspapers have changed. And the newspapers that are surviving really aren't the local newspapers. It's the national newspapers that really invested in investigative sources. Ironically, I think a lot of radio survives by being more local, which may be bad for a guy like me who wants to do national radio. But I think local radio survives. But I do think that there's an opportunity for some national shows out there. And I've tried to build and structure this show to be mindful of that and make the cost very, very cheap, really no cost for stations to take me. Any station in the country can take this show, and they pay nothing at all to take it, nor do they have to file affidavits and say they've run my ads and stuff like that. Talk radio is not going away. Talk radio will be around long after the people writing that talk radio is going away are in the ground dead. Talk radio will be here in one shape or one form, and it's very much self-serving, wishful thinking from the left to think otherwise. So don't worry about it. And I'll talk to you guys tomorrow.